So I released this video the other day where I talked about the controversy surrounding Netflix's new show Ancient Apocalypse and what I thought about the series as a whole. Now my videos may look completely amateur because, well, they are, but I do try and do as much research as time allows me, and since I really enjoyed Ancient Apocalypse, I wanted to go that extra mile. This, unsurprisingly, left me with plenty of interesting material I wanted to cover but couldn't fit into the original video. So in this follow-up, I'm going to focus on the top 5 pieces of evidence that Graham Hancock presents in the show to support his theory and the conclusions I came to based on my own investigation. But whilst there will be a brief recap for you lovely lot, I recommend you watch the previous video first if you haven't seen it already. So get comfy and join me on this fascinating journey through one of the most amazing historical theories you'll ever see. Again. So before the recap, I just want to say that I'm not feeling very well, so apologies if my voice is even worse than usual. Also, I've used less video footage this time since the last video got a claim against it. Not that I'm anywhere close to being monetized by YouTube, but you can help in that department by kindly subscribing to the channel. It's a lot more fun doing all this work knowing a few of you are out there watching it. So on to the promised recap of Ancient Apocalypse. British, writer Graham Hancock began formulating a theory in the mid-1990s of an extremely advanced civilization that had survived through the Ice Age only to be practically wiped out by a meteor storm that triggered a rapid change in the climate known as the Younger Dryas. Hancock believes that surviving members of this civilization set out by boat to the four corners of the world and shared their knowledge of architecture, agriculture, and other useful technologies with local hunter-gatherers, enabling them to rapidly advance in civilization terms. In Ancient Apocalypse, he travels the world visiting ancient and prehistoric sites to try and show the viewers evidence of his theory, as well as explain why mainstream scholars disagree with him. There's obviously more to it than that, but this is a recap and we'll get into that good stuff soon. One quick note, Graham Hancock has written a lot of books on this subject, which obviously contain a lot more information. Whilst I intend to read them someday, it won't be anytime soon, so this video is purely based upon the evidence he presents in the TV show. So for the first piece of evidence at number 5, Graham presents several ancient sites that he claims are situated on top of much older structures. Now, if he's correct, that would suggest people in the area had knowledge and technology far beyond what they should have had for that time. He makes these claims about Gunung Padang on the Isle of Java in Indonesia, and the Great Pyramid of Cholula in Mexico, and Gigantea in Malta. Now, in the first two cases, he claims that buried below the existing structure are smaller, far older buildings created many thousands of years earlier than the surface structures. In the case of Gigantea in Malta, he claims that since archaeologists cannot date the original structure, that it's actually much older than they originally estimate. So let's start with Gunung Padang. This incredible megalithic site, that's a site where humans have stacked a load of rocks up in some kind of formation or other, features thousands of naturally formed stone slabs that have been arranged by humans to form a stepped pyramid structure on top of a hill. Geologist Danny Hilman Natawijaja, apologies to my Indonesian viewer, I tried my best there, and his team performed a number of tests, including core sampling, carbon dating, and geophysics, and released a paper suggesting that multiple layers of construction exist below the hill, dating back as far as 20,000 years. In contrast, volcanologist Sutaniko Bronto firmly argues that underneath Gunung Padang is an extinct volcano, a view that seems to be supported by the majority of scholars in both Indonesia and internationally. Whilst I do have some doubts about Hillman's findings, his team have actually done the scientific work and come to their conclusions. What have the opposing lot done? Not much more than criticised from what I can see online. I really hope the Indonesian government get things sorted and restart excavating the deeper layers of the site so we can find out the truth once and for all. As for the Great Pyramid of Cholula, I felt Graham's evidence is pretty half-hearted here. He talks about the deep tunnels, 8 kilometers of them, and an ancient secret at its heart, but then really doesn't back any of this up in any tangible way. From what I can tell, even the deepest, oldest pyramid dates to about 500 BC. He then spends the rest of the episode trying to link the pyramid design to other sites such as Gunung Padang, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and other places, but I've already covered why pyramids were likely the design of choice for ancient builders in my previous video, and Hancock's counter-argument relating to pyramids being a spiritual design really doesn't do it for me. Sorry, bud. Finally, let's talk about Gigantea in Malta. Now this is slightly different. Instead of arguing that an older structure lies beneath, Graham argues that the megalith itself is actually many thousands of years older than archaeologists think. He presents a theory of humans walking to Malta during the Ice Age when it was still connected to Sicily, which I think is entirely plausible. But it leads to one of my biggest problems with Graham's argument about all 3 sites, namely the man-made objects that have been found in and around them. In all 3 cases, the pottery, tools, and other man-made objects date to the age proposed by archaeologists. At Gunung Padang, they found bone tools nearby, dating back to the Ice Age. Now, I'm a decent builder, but I don't think I could get the lads to build a giant stone pyramid using bone tools, even if I offered them overtime, which I wouldn't, of course. The same applies to the pyramids of Cholula and Malta. The only man-made finds date to a period far later than that which would align to Hancock's theory. Surely, if these sites really were built 10,000 years earlier, and given the incredible amount of manpower and tools they clearly took to construct, you'd at least expect to find a hammer or a chisel dated back to that era. But no, not a sausage. So for Hancock's first evidence, I have to say, it's possible, but not likely. But let's get digging to make sure, hey archaeology bros. At number 4, we see Graham share evidence that many ancient civilizations around the world had eerily similar myths about giants or wise people who arrived by boat and taught them how to build their civilizations. He shows evidence from Mexico of Quetzalcoatl, who arrived from the east on a boat with no sails, which is strikingly similar to other civilization myths such as Viracocha in the Andes or Prometheus in ancient Greece, or my personal favourite, Maui in Polynesia. Yes, that Maui.
Can I say except you're welcome?
Anyways, I've got a big problem with this evidence, namely that whilst these myths have commonality, they don't link to any sites that were built in the post-Ice Age period Graham's theory relies on. Now he does try to do that by looking at another temple in Mexico that has a depiction of Quetzalcoatl. He and another bloke, who he refers to as a researcher, claim that it shows Quetzalcoatl escaping an apocalypse to arrive in prehistoric Mexico. Now I've taken a butcher's at it, and maybe they're right, but it feels like a fair bit of projection on their part. Just remember, this temple is only 1300 years old, so trying to say that they're depicting the scene from a myth that occurred more than 10,000 years ago is a bit of a stretch. So whilst I loved this part of the theory, I found it hard to credit too much. Evidence number 3. So in episode 6, we see Graham travel to America to look at a giant snake-shaped feature called Serpent Mound. Now archaeologists age Serpent Mound to 1000 AD, but Graham says evidence suggests that this was a reconstruction and that material has been found dating the site to 321 BC. He then states that he believes that this is also due to reconstruction work and that the site is much, much older. He also points out that he's banned from visiting the site, which is bloody lame. Let the man visit the giant snake, lads. Hancock's evidence that Serpent Mound is thousands of years older than believed is based on the fact that several parts of the snake's body align to astronomical events such as the sun's equinox, that's the sun's position in the sky on the longest and shortest days of the year. For example, the body of the snake at the point shown here aligns exactly to where the sun rises on the summer solstice, and this bend aligns to the spring and autumn equinoxes when the night and day are equal length, and the final bend aligns perfectly to the winter solstice or the shortest day. So far, so good. He then points out that the mouth of the giant snake doesn't quite align to the summer solstice sunset. However, he states that the mouth would have aligned to the summer solstice sunset about 12,800 years ago, when the sun's position would have been 3 degrees different due to how the Earth's tilt works. Very interesting. However, he doesn't address the fact that if the head aligned to the summer solstice sunset 12,800 years ago, wouldn't that mean that the body, which remember does currently align to these various important positions of the sun, would not have aligned back then? Maybe I'm missing something, but I've watched this episode 4 times and something doesn't add up. Surely, the body should be 3 degrees out of alignment just like the head is. Who knows? Certainly not me. In it too, we look at the event that Hancock suggests destroyed his advanced civilization, a great cataclysm that occurred towards the end of the Ice Age. So as I've pointed out earlier, one of the main factors stopping me being a fully paid up member of the Hancock Believers Society is the lack of any physical evidence of his Ice Age super civilization. Surely such an advanced people would have left something behind, a tool here, some writing there, but so far not a dicky bird. But Graham's got an explanation for that, namely that nearly the whole society was wiped out by a great apocalypse, and interestingly, there's plenty of evidence to support that just such an event occurred. Graham refers to the Younger Dryas, where sudden, dramatic climate change greatly altered the landscape of large parts of the Earth, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere. Which is also, by the way, why you can't have your own direwolf like the Starks in Game of Thrones do, because it wasn't the Lannisters or the undead that killed off all the direwolves, it was the Younger Dryas. Anyway, Hancock believes a meteor, or more accurately, a meteor shower, triggered the Younger Dryas rapid cooling event, and I have to say, I think he's right. There's plenty of science to back this theory up, not just the evidence he presents on the show, though that's pretty convincing too if you ask me. On the show, Graham introduces researchers who have been studying a layer of soil called the black mat, that can be found all over North America, as well as in parts of Western Europe and even further afield. They contend that the black mat is a result of extreme temperatures such as prolonged firestorms that occurred around 10,600 years ago. The counter-argument is that black mat is the result of swamp-like conditions in those areas, but from what I could find out, there's scientists on both sides of this argument. One thing that isn't contested is that there was definitely some pretty dramatic climate change going on back there, the type that could result in floods and other things that align with Hancock's theory. And Hancock's evidence is further bolstered by the rare elements that have been found in the black mat soil, such as platinum, iridium, and unobtainium.
The richest unobtainium deposit within 200 clicks.
Sorry, that last one's for next week's video. Anyways, the other two elements are more than likely to be extraterrestrial, pointing to some form of meteor impact. There is other evidence too, such as glass-like substance that results from extreme heat. But again, there appears to be scientists contesting for both sides of the argument as to whether extraterrestrial material is overly represented or not in the black mat layer. As for me, I find Hancock's evidence pretty convincing. I think there's a good chance that the Earth took a kicking from a fractured meteor around this time, and with the sudden rise on the sea levels, it's a compelling argument as to why we can't find Hancock's Ice Age civilization. That being said, surely the surviving members who travelled to distant lands to share their knowledge would have left something behind as they taught the locals to make new, advanced tools, or write or draw. Still, we'll call this one a win for Graham. And at number 1, the most convincing evidence of the entire show is the incredible ancient site of Qubekli Tepe in Turkey. Archaeologists actually agree for once and accept it dates back to about 9600 BC. Now, as a Brit, I'm pretty proud that my ancient ancestors managed to knock up Stonehenge. I've been there a few times, and let me tell you, those blocks are bloody huge. To think, 7,000 years before my lot were doing that, there were people in Turkey building something as amazing as Qubekli Tepe. Remember, that's long before horses were domesticated or the wheel was supposed to have been invented. How the bloody hell did they build this place? The central stone blocks are over 10 tons each, and the locals were meant to be busy hunting and gathering at this time in history. And what's really impressive is that the oldest section of Qubekli Tepe happens to be the biggest and best decorated. The rest of the site is built over the next 1,000 years and seems to be less impressive than the original section. That's not something you'd expect. Surely they'd get better over time, not worse. What Hancock is implying here is that the locals were losing the knowledge they'd received from his lost civilization sometime earlier in history, and I have to say, this place really does support his theory in my opinion. Now, I should point out that as much as I love Graham's theory, and I really do, part of me also doesn't mind him being wrong. You see, if Qubekli Tepe isn't the result of surviving members of an ancient civilization teaching the local hunter-gatherers the knowledge to build it, then it means the locals worked it out for themselves. We know that civilizations can accelerate incredibly quickly at times. We've seen it with the Romans, ancient Greeks, in the Middle East, and South America, and obviously Britain, yay. So why not Turkey 12,000 years ago? As Graham says himself, advanced civilizations have always lived side by side with primitive ones, and it's still happening today, just like the English living so close to the French. I'm only joking. I've got a lot of love for the French, just stop beating us at rugby, okay? So perhaps a community of people did find sudden inspiration. They created amazing places and then faded back into a more primitive lifestyle over time. Maybe we'll never know, but this place fascinates me, and it's the primary reason I'm keeping an open mind to Graham Hancock and his incredible theory. Now, this will probably be my last video on the subject, at least until Graham releases a new series about it. And given that Graham's son works in the commissioning department at Netflix, I reckon the odds are good. Finally, some nepotism I can get on board with. So thanks for joining me on this journey, and whatever your views are on the subject, let's keep it civil, eh? I think the world's a much better place for having people challenge the status quo, even if they are completely bonkers. The alternative stunts us as a race and takes some of the fun and wonder out of life, at least in my humble opinion. Bloody hell, you've made it to the end of the show. Well done you. Now, if you could be a diamond and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, that will make sure we can keep in touch in future. Please also drop a like on the video and maybe even comment below. A bit of banter is always welcome. I'd like to wish you all the best. Until next time.